Usually when we look at a massive sports match on paper, there's this expectation of a script. Like it's supposed to play out like a Hollywood blockbuster.
Right, exactly. You've got the main characters and the supporting cast.
Yeah, the team with a 70% possession, the global superstars, a massive pedigree, they're framed as the heroes, right?
Yeah.
They're supposed to win. The stats always seem to tell this really neat, predictable story.
I mean, it feels incredibly deterministic. You feed the historical numbers, the player valuations, the possession metrics into a machine, and the expected result just pops out. We are basically conditioned to think the team dominating the ball will eventually break the underdog down.
But then you step onto the pitch in a do-or-die World Cup group finale, and suddenly that pristine script goes straight out the window. We end up looking at a tactical landscape that is, honestly, completely wild.
Yeah, it becomes a totally different game.
Which is why today's deep dive is so fascinating. We are pulling from a massive stack of sources today. We've got the raw match footage, the granular SofaScore tactical data, post-match press conferences, and the global commentary surrounding the event, just to figure out how the impossible actually happened.
It really was impossible on paper.
Completely. We are taking you straight to Monterrey, Mexico, the Estadio BBVA. It's June 24th, 2026, the World Cup Group A finale. You've got South Africa, affectionately known as Bafana Bafana, taking on South Korea. And the stakes for this match could literally not have been higher.
No, they really couldn't. And I think the contrast in pressure is what makes this specific matchup so compelling for you to look at. You have South Korea, right? Ranked 25th in the world. Going into this game, they held all the cards. They only needed a single point just to draw to safely advance to the knockout stages.
Just a draw. It's a huge cushion.
Exactly. And then you look at South Africa, sitting way down at 60th in the world rankings. I mean, their tournament had been an absolute grind. They lost their opening game to Mexico, which was this brutal, grueling match where they actually went down to 9 men.
Yeah, 2 red cards in 1 game is devastating.
Right. And then they barely scraped a draw with Czechia. So for South Africa, the math was agonizingly simple. They absolutely had to win.
Spoiler alert for anyone who somehow missed it. They did. A historic 1-0 upset. This victory sent South Africa to the knockout rounds for the very first time in their 4 World Cup appearances. They tried and failed in '98, 2002, and 2010, but this time they finally broke the curse.
It's just an incredible achievement for that program.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because our mission today is to figure out exactly how they pulled off this incredible tactical masterclass, the shocking managerial gambles that defined the 90 minutes, and really just the sheer willpower that made it happen.
To really grasp the magnitude of this upset, we have to look at the broader context of tournament football. World Cups are entirely defined by these win-or-go-home scenarios. The pressure, it just completely rewires how a team operates.
Yeah, it's not just about who has the better passing accuracy anymore.
Exactly. Tactics are foundational, of course, but human psychology becomes the dominant force. And in this specific match, that psychological pressure wasn't just resting on the shoulders of the 22 players on the grass. It was introduced by this massive external variable before the whistle even blew.
Right, you are talking about the man holding the whistle.
I am.
Before we even look at the gameplay or the formations, the tension hovering over this pitch was intensely focused on the official, an Argentine referee named Facundo Tello.
Yeah, and any defender who follows international football knows that name. Tello's statistics are genuinely terrifying if you play a physical brand of football. We looked at his career averages across over 320 official matches. He has issued more than 1,600 cautions.
Wait, 1,600? That's insane.
Yeah, and over 130 send-offs. To put that in perspective for you, that averages out to 5 yellow cards and nearly half a red card every single game. He does not let the game flow if things get chippy at all.
The sources mentioned he officiated an Argentine Cup final right before the 2022 World Cup, where he sent off 10 players in a single match. 10.
Wow, it's almost comical.
You can only imagine the locker room conversations before this game. Now, for South Korea, Tello was a bit of a mixed bag. He was actually a good omen for them from 2022 because he officiated their dramatic comeback win over Portugal. But, he had also previously carded 2 of their biggest attacking stars, Lee Kang and Wang Hee-chan.
Yeah, so they had to be careful. But for South Africa, assigning Tele to this match felt like a walking nightmare. Bafana relies really heavily on a physical, aggressive identity. They committed 21 fouls in their first 2 games of this tournament, and like we mentioned, they had 2 players sent off against Mexico.
So Tello's notoriously strict officiating was a massive threat to their core strategy. It's like being asked to play a high-stakes game of operation, but somebody tweaked the buzzer to be 10 times more sensitive.
That is the perfect analogy.
Does knowing the referee is this strict force a team like South Africa to completely abandon that aggressive identity? Because that's what makes them dangerous. I kept waiting for them to back off and play it safe to avoid going down to 10 men again.
Well, usually teams do get timid. They give attackers too much space out of fear of conceding a foul. But South Africa played this brilliant game of chicken here. They didn't abandon their aggression. They channeled it into a masterclass of match management.
How so? Like, what did that actually look like on the pitch?
They applied intense physical pressure. They were shadowing the Korean midfielders, cutting off passing angles, and just standing their ground, but without actually committing the reckless lunging challenges that draw Tello's ire. They essentially dared South Korea to run through a brick wall, but they made sure the wall was entirely stationary when the impact happened.
And it worked flawlessly. South Africa actually managed to avoid any unnecessary cards until very late in the game. Aubrey Modiba finally picked up a yellow alongside Korea's Cho Kae-sung, but that wasn't until the rhythm of the game was already breaking up in the final stages anyway.
Right. They effectively neutralized the referee variable through pure, concentrated mental discipline.
Which is incredibly hard to do for 90 minutes.
Oh, absolutely. But that discipline wasn't just about avoiding yellow cards. It was the absolute foundation of their tactical setup. Because knowing they could manage their physical energy without getting sent off allowed them to focus entirely on their primary objective.
Which was neutralizing South Korea's overwhelming dominance of the ball. And when we look at the SofaScore tactical data, the statistical contrast is just wild.
It really is.
In the first half alone, South Korea held a staggering 68% of the possession. They completed 305 passes compared to South Africa's 200. By all traditional metrics of control, South Korea was suffocating them.
Yeah, you see numbers like that, and you immediately assume the team with the ball is creating wave after waves of dangerous attacks.
But then you look at the actual offensive output. Despite having the ball for basically the entire match, South Korea was outshot by South Africa 13-8.
That is just a bizarre stat line.
Right. And if we look at expected goals, or XG, which is a metric that measures the actual quality and likelihood of those scoring chances going in, South Africa edged them out. 1.10 to 1.00. Having 68% possession but losing the shot count is like owning a Ferrari but only driving it in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Oh, yeah.
It looks impressive, the engine sounds great, but you aren't actually getting anywhere.
Let's push that Ferrari analogy a little further to explain the how behind this, because South Africa didn't just happen to find South Korea in traffic. South Africa actively built the traffic jam.
Okay, break that down for me.
South African coach Hugo Bruce deployed a 4-2-3-1 compact mid-block. To visualize this for you, imagine the pitch divided into 3 horizontal thirds. South Africa completely surrendered the top third. They didn't bother chasing South Korea's defenders around at all.
They just let them have the ball back there.
Exactly. Instead, they dropped all their players into the middle third of the pitch, creating this incredibly dense thicket of bodies.
They basically formed a box in the center of the field that said, you cannot pass through here.
Precisely. They congested the middle so heavily that South Korea was forced to just endlessly pass the ball left to right, right to left, in a giant U-shape around the perimeter of the South African defense. And look at the defensive data to back this up. South Africa had 42 clearances to Korea's 15.
That's a huge gap.
And 15 interceptions to just 4. They were reading every single passing lane because they dictated exactly where those passes had to go.
That interception stat really tells the story of how proactive a reactive defense can actually be. But, South Korea did have some chances early on. It wasn't a total shutout for minute 1. They almost found a way through the traffic jam right out of the gate.
There was a massive early scare in just the second minute. South Korean stand-in skipper Kim Min-jae sent a really powerful header toward goal, and it was cleared right off the line by Aubrey Modiba. It was a heart-stopping moment.
And then Lee Kang-in narrowly missed a shot in the 8th minute. But after that initial storm, South Africa's defense completely took over, anchored by their absolute MVP of the match.
We have to talk about their goalkeeper and captain, Ronwen Williams.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
Our sources have him with a 7.9 SofaScore rating, which is massive for a keeper in a low-scoring game. He had a goals prevented stat of 1.42. Let's explain what that goals prevented metric actually means, because it highlights just how crucial he was. That metric doesn't just count saves. It looks at the trajectory, the speed, and the location of the shots he faced, compares it to historical data, and determines how many goals an average professional goalkeeper would have conceded.
So Williams mathematically saved nearly a goal and a half that should have gone in.
Exactly. He made two incredibly crucial saves from right inside the penalty box where his reaction time had to be split second.
He was an absolute wall. And the contrast with the South Korean keeper, Kim Sung-gyu, is really telling. Kim Sung-gyu made a fantastic double save at the 30-minute mark, denying Thalente Ambatha and Evidence Makabopa back-to-back.
Yeah, that was a great sequence for him.
It was, but ultimately his goals prevented stat was a negative 0.61. He let in a shot that the data suggests an average keeper might have stopped. That fractional statistical difference between the sticks ultimately defined the match.
And the frustration for South Korea was just palpable. Their offense became entirely static. They were just passing the ball around the perimeter, waiting for Lee Kang in to send in these hopeful crosses. But nobody was making the necessary off-the-ball runs, those darting sprints behind the defenders, to actually connect with those crosses.
Which has to be agonizing for a manager to watch. You have 68% of the ball, but your players are just standing still like foosball figures. When an offense is that stagnant, all eyes immediately snap to the dugout. The manager has to do something to break the deadlock. And that leads us directly into some shocking decisions made by the men on the touchline.
The dugout drama in this game was off the charts.
Truly. So South Korean coach Hong Young-bo made a decision before the game that completely dominated the pre-match headlines. He dropped his talismanic captain, Son Heung-min, from the starting lineup.
To truly understand how massive this was, Son had started 13 consecutive World Cup matches for South Korea. That's a streak dating all the way back to 2014.
It's unheard of. He replaced him with Oh Hyun-gyu, who, based on the match footage, was practically invisible in the first half. Son eventually came on at halftime as part of a triple substitution where Korea aggressively shifted to a back four.
Right, trying to push more numbers forward.
But even then, Son struggled to make an impact. He only managed 29 touches in the whole second half. And get this, only one of those touches was actually inside the South African penalty area.
Yeah, the tactical shift just didn't fix the core issue, which was a total lack of penetration. Now look at the completely different emotional landscape in the other dugout. South African coach Hugo Bruce is a septuagenarian. He's a veteran manager who has seen everything football has to offer.
He's been around forever.
But even for him, the pressure of this moment was immense. He made a highly emotional admission after the game, revealing that if South Africa had lost and been eliminated, he had seriously considered retiring from football altogether.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to push back a little on the intense media criticism that Hong Min-bo is getting for dropping Son Heung-min. Look, Son had not scored in the first two matches of the tournament. The entire Korean offense looked stagnant against Mexico. Was Hong Young-bo really making a shocking gamble, or was he just making a cold, data-driven decision that any ruthless manager should make when their star isn't performing?
Well, analytically, you can completely justify the logic. If a piece of the machine isn't functioning efficiently, you swap it out for one that might. The data probably supported a change.
Right.
However, data cannot account for the soul and the psychological baseline of a team. Son Heung-min isn't just a player. He is the emotional heartbeat of that squad. When you bench your talisman in a do-or-die game, it sends a powerful psychological ripple through the rest of the players.
Like it messes with their confidence.
Exactly. Sometimes it lights a fire, but more often, it creates a sense of panic. The other 10 players look around, see their leader on the bench, and feel instability. Based on how static and hesitant they played, it seems to have triggered that panic.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't just spreadsheet your way to morale.
Exactly the opposite of what happened with Hugo Bruce. His major managerial intervention wasn't about benching a struggling star. It was a proactive, tactical injection of pace. In the 62nd minute, Bruce made what turned out to be a masterstroke substitution. He brought on Chapeng Moremi.
And that single substitution immediately triggered the climax of the entire match. Bruce brings Moremi on in the 62nd minute. In the 63rd minute, South Africa scores the goal that sends shockwaves far beyond that stadium in Monterrey.
The sequence of this goal is just a beautiful illustration of transitional counterattacking football. Let's break down the mechanics of how they bypass that massive Korean possession. It starts deep in South Africa's own half. They absorb an attack, win the ball, and Ime Okan immediately looks forward.
No hesitation.
Right. He moves it up to Evidence Mekopa, who quickly finds Relebahio Mafiking.
The speed of the transition is what catches Korea completely off guard. Mofoken gets his head up and spots the brand-new substitute, Moremi, making this blistering run out on the right wing.
And Moremi has literally just stepped onto the pitch. I mean, his legs are entirely fresh, and his first major involvement in the game is to receive this pass in stride.
Yeah.
He doesn't panic. He draws the defender in and delivers a perfectly weighted pass across the top of the box to Tapalo Maseko.
Maseko receives it, violently cuts inside onto his favored left foot, finds this tiny window through the Korean defense, and just drives the ball low and hard into the bottom right corner.
It was a surgical, lethal counterattack.
3 passes, back of the net. And the sources note Maseko's place in history here, because at 22 years and 225 days old, that strike made him the second youngest South African to ever score in a World Cup.
The stadium reaction described in the report sounds like pure electricity. There were still 6 agonizing minutes of added time to survive after the 90-minute mark, but when that final whistle finally blew, the scenes among the 51,000 fans were euphoric.
I bet.
Comedian Rory Petzer was actually in the stands, and he captured the mood perfectly. He called it, quote, "the best live sporting moment of my whole life."
Wow. But, to truly appreciate the weight of this victory, we have to step outside the 4 lines of the stadium for a second. We have to look at the off-pitch noise, because South Africa was carrying a massive emotional burden into this tournament that went way beyond just advancing out of a group stage.
Yeah, the global commentary and the press conference transcripts we reviewed provide crucial context for understanding the team's mindset here. Now, as we dive into this, it is important to clearly state that we are simply reporting the context provided in our sources to understand the player's environment.
Right, we're not taking any political sides or endorsing any viewpoints here.
Exactly. The reality is the South African national team was facing severe vocal criticism from several other African nations throughout the tournament.
The criticism was stemming from reports of recent anti-immigrant sentiment and violence directed at migrant workers back home in South Africa. So the team found themselves caught in the crossfire of this massive geopolitical issue.
You are asking these players to step onto the biggest stage of their professional lives, representing their nation, while simultaneously bearing the weight of intense continent-wide political criticism directed at their homeland.
It's hard to even fathom. Usually, a national team is a unifying symbol, but they were absorbing negativity from all sides.
The mental fortitude required to not let that kind of external noise fracture the locker room is profound.
You can hear how heavily it weighed on them in their post-match interviews, too. Hugo Broos explicitly talked about silencing the big mouths who had written them off over the past few weeks. And the goal scorer, Maseko, made a very pointed dedication. He dedicated the historic win to everyone who supported them, but also, quote, for those who didn't.
What's fascinating here is the psychology of how the team utilized that external negativity. It's a great study in sports mentality. Instead of letting the political criticism and the immense pressure of the tournament crush them, they used it to forge an impenetrable us against the world mentality.
Yeah, they took all that ambient noise and transformed it into flawless, on-pitch discipline. They turned the locker room pressure into a unifying shield.
Exactly. You don't endure 81 final third entries from a team like South Korea without a defensive unit that is completely emotionally unified. They suffer together in that mid-block, and they triumph together on the counter.
So let's look at what this all means for the tournament landscape right now. In Group A, the final standings have host nation Mexico winning the group with a perfect 9 points. South Africa's monumental upset finishes them in second place with 4 points, and they have officially booked a ticket to Los Angeles to face co-host Canada on June 28th.
Which is going to be a massive game.
Oh, totally. South Korea's fate, though, is much more precarious. Finishing third with 3 points means they enter a really nerve-wracking waiting game. Under the expanded 48-team format of this World Cup, they have to sit back and watch the remaining groups play out, hoping they scrape through as one of the best third-place teams.
It's an agonizing position to be in for a team with their pedigree and expectations.
It really is a massive fall from grace for them. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I think the core takeaway here is incredibly relatable. Whether you are managing a project at work, navigating a tough situation in your personal life, or, playing on a pitch. South Africa proved that you don't need to control 68% of the conversation. You don't need to hold the majority of the resources to walk away with the win. You don't need the shiny Ferrari. You just need to be ruthlessly, flawlessly efficient with the 32% that you do have.
That is a brilliant framework. And if we connect this incredible match back to the bigger picture of the sport itself, it leaves us with a lingering, highly provocative question. As this new, expanded 48-team World Cup inevitably introduces more and more of these David versus Goliath matchups, pitting historical, possession-heavy heavyweights against incredibly disciplined relative underdogs, we have to ask ourselves, is the era of dominating possession dead?
Wow, that's a huge shift to even consider.
Think about the mechanics of what we just watched. When a team like South Africa can strategically park the bus, endure 81 final third entries without breaking, completely neutralize a world-class offense, and win the game with a single surgical three-pass counterattack, are we watching the extinction of proactive, possession-based football?
It really makes you wonder.
Is the future of the international game going to be defined by the ultimate reactive counterpunch?
That is a fascinating thought to leave on. It brings us right back to where we started today. You could look at all the tactical data, you can calculate the expected goals, you can write the Hollywood script of how a match is supposed to go. But football isn't a neat math equation.
Nope, never is.
Sometimes the script gets torn to shreds, the Ferrari gets hopelessly stuck in the traffic jam you build, and chaos theory wins the day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into a truly historic World Cup moment. Keep questioning the stats, and we will catch you next time.